All right, today on BRStv, we're going to do the NSA or Negative Space Aquascape how-to. We're going to show you exactly how to create this type of Negative Space Aquascape. And more importantly, instead of this little guy that was designed for an 18-inch cube, we're going to do it for a 120-gallon tank. So create something much bigger. You get to follow along, see all the steps that are required to do this. I guarantee that anyone can do this. All you need to do is learn a few simple tips, and then we can create any type of rock structure that you might want to using these big boulders, but turning them into something exactly like this. I think the first thing is really what is an NSA and why would you even want to do it? And there's a handful of reasons to this. And if you look at this, you can see that it was all boulders. I broke it up and I made little pieces out of it and re-glued them together to create something very sturdy and has a total three-dimensional look to it. You can see all the way through it. In fact, this entire wing here is all just about a quarter size attached at the bottom. And it has a lot of different factors that makes this attractive, at least something new that you might want to try. And the first one is you're taking this super large boulder, and you're not going to believe it, but I'm going to turn it into that, but at scale, into something bigger. And instead of stacking the rocks, creating something artistic that is really unique to you and something that you really want to look at and enjoy for many years. One of the biggest benefits is you get that sense of depth. Because you can't really see through all of this mound of rock here, it really only gives you like a two-dimensional image when you're looking at it. However, when you have something like this where you can see all the way through it from multiple different angles, and when you turn it and look at it from different angles from within the tank, you can see all kinds of different depths. So you get the whole depth of the entire tank instead of where the mound of rock would stop. It just creates a much more visibly interesting like sculpture inside of your tank. And on top of that, it actually opens up the area for where you can put corals. Instead of just a big mound to put on there, you can put them on here, you can put them up here, you can put them up here, and it just opens up the area, and you could probably add a lot more coral to a structure like this. But for today's reefer, one of the biggest advantages or most desirable aspects of this is flow. With the standard stacked rock aquascape, really you can only get flow in front of it, maybe going over the top of it, and then you get into challenges after that. With an aquascape like this, I can get flow that goes in front of it, I can get flow that goes over the top of it, I can get the flow that goes around the back of it, and really this entire structure is actually only got the footprint of about a coffee can in the tank, so I can get flow around the bottom of it. The whole thing flow is going through it, which just wouldn't do with a stacked rock aquascape in many cases. So you can get all these options for flow with this kind of aquascape. Really gets into the network of the coral itself, as well as the aquascape, and it just really keeps it clean as well. So that's a big thing for me as well in this whole thing, is I can now clean the sand really easy behind it. With the stacked aquascape, the sand's pretty much just tied up back there. You'll never be able to clean it. In this case, I can actually get back there with a siphon and clean the whole thing around the whole tank. And even if it was bare bottom, I can clean it, or even use pumps on the bottom to flush it off. It's just a lot easier to keep clean. Also, considering the livestock here, there's a lot more habitat for fish in this type of aquascape, or at least where you can see them. A lot of shy fish will hide somewhere in the cracks of this. You may never ever see them. In this case, they can hide comfortably, get a little bit of protection, but you can still see them in the open water, and it just really makes it more accessible and comfortable for the fish in many cases. And end of story. Building something like this is probably 25 pieces of rock, is an artistic thing you get to do for your tank, becomes the heart and soul of the tank. And to be honest, after you do one, you'll probably never go back to just stacking rocks, because there's a sense of pride that comes from this type of creation, and for years to come you'll get to see it and show it off. It's just a really, real cool project, and I think an evolution of the way that we use Reef Saver rocks in the aquarium. So we're going to get into showing you exactly how to do this. So step one is just really the preparation and materials that you're going to be using, so get to understand what you're working with. So for a 120-gallon tank, I ordered 100 pounds of this Reef Saver rock. It'll be really interesting to see how much of it I actually use by the end of it. I got a bunch more on the floor here. I got a bag of Marco sand, which is going to hide all of the imperfections that I do from this. You'll see that later. I also ordered 4 pieces of small foundation pieces. You can see it's real flat. This is going to be the base of the structure, so it's really really stable. And I also ordered a couple of the larger pieces. So this is just to get a reference what a large piece of that foundation looks like. Sometimes it's a little bit bigger than that, but I ordered 4 pieces. The big thing here is you are going to want to order more than you need. You're creating an artistic structure and you're going to have some waste along the way. So make sure you order more rock and a couple more pieces of foundation than you think you need, because you'll be happier with the end result. Also, we have the mortar, which you're going to see us use. So this is like a cement. However, it's a cement that cures underwater, like a marine grade. It also has a polymer in it, which gives it just a little bit of flex. So this isn't the same kind of cement you just like go buy at your Home Depot. It's a little different and designed for this specific purpose. We also have a chisel and a hammer. So this is a 4-pound hammer. You're really going to want to get something with some weight to it, because I'm going to have to crack all the way through this thing, and it's a lot easier if you have some momentum behind it. And then a chisel. Just get a big old chisel. I like these guys just because I don't hit my hammer or my hand when I'm hammering on it. So get something like this. You can also try, you know, like a wood chisel. Obviously never going to be good for wood ever again. And I may actually try this during this project and share with you how it works out. If you want to make you know, a little bit of a finer chip or you know, shape using one of these. But with that last project, I actually did it all with just these 2 tools. So we'll see how that works out. You're going to want some glue, and this is super glue, and this is going to be used to glue all the pieces together, not for its initial, or for just initial stability, to hold it together. We use that mortar later on to like really solidify and make it stable. And some Instastat. This is important because I don't want to spend like 3 weeks on this trying to make it all, wait for it to dry. I want to put the pieces together and then within a minute have them hold. So this is what that's going to do. I got a few bottles. You're going to use more than you think of this, so make sure that you get at least a couple of bottles. And then you're also going to want some tape. So I got a 120-gallon tank, so this table happens to be about that size, so it's good for that. But if you're using something else, you're going to want to use some tape, so you can tape off the inside structure. You can take 2 different paths there. You can either tape off the exact size of your tank and then make sure to leave a couple inches of room or wherever you want it. But also getting height is nice. So if you got a few extra bucks, I think these are like $2 a piece. You can go get some white PVC at Home Depot and then build a structure or a cube. And you're going to see me do this in just a second. But this will give you all 4 dimensions of your tank, so you can really visualize it. And for like the 20 bucks in materials, gives you all the boundaries and really will give you a great dimension of, you know, how all this rock's going to come together to the end result. You are probably going to want to wear like some safety glasses while you're chiseling out the hammer, because pieces do shoot out. And the last piece here is that you're going to want to make sure you're chiseling all the rock on a surface you don't mind damaging. So don't put it on your kitchen table or anything like that, because when you whack it with a hammer, you're definitely going to put dents in it. In our case, we put down a protective layer on the top of this table and then taped cardboard over the top so that when we whack it, we're not damaging anything. But these are probably all the tools that you're going to need to complete this project. All right, so this is step 2. You can see that we've framed out the aquarium here. You get like a little spatial representation of how big your tank is going to be and the type of aquascape you're going to build for it. It goes way beyond just the tape that you would normally use. So getting this kind of 3-dimensional aspect to it is super valuable if you're going to do anything, you know, that involves a lot of effort. If you're going to spend any time on this, the 20 bucks and little edges, it makes it totally worth it. So pick those things up. But I'm going to probably use, instead of just creating one big wall of rock across the back, probably going to use 2 or 3 different structures that are independent of each other. A, just because it's easier to, you know, manage those smaller pieces, but B, because I can create an interweaving look or interwoven look that crosses each other and creates something totally different. So that's what you're going to see, but really you can do anything that you want here. There's all kinds of ideas, and you're going to see it right away, all the different things that you could do with this type of rock once you take the brave step of breaking it up and then recreating the exact aquascape that you want. So the number one thing that will impact your success rates more than anything else here is find some inspiration for what you're going to do. You're not going to emulate it exactly, but you can start to see the things that you like and don't like and then go recreate that on your own. So WL Marine over on Instagram was a really great one. He does something a little bit different and even more negative scape than really anything else with all these plateaus. So check that out. But really you can go to Reef to Reef, you can go to Ask BRStv on Facebook, all kinds of different areas areas where you can just search for an aquascape that you like and see the items about it. Really pay attention to what it is that you like and try to recreate that. But one of the things I like to do more than anything else is actually look to nature. And you can't really look at the ocean's reef and try to emulate that because it looks different than your aquarium. But you can look at other elements of nature like trees, and you can see where there's a lot of really cool things where there's balance to this organism. It's not symmetrical, but balance that creates a really visual, interesting image. Specifically man-made types of things like bonsai trees. You can see how somebody crafted this to create a really visually interesting image, and it has that sense of balance that flows in a single direction and makes the eye want to travel around. So look for different things, especially into nature, that you want to create, and you can probably do it. All right, so now's the fun part. You're probably a little scared to take all this rock that you just bought and broke it up, but that's exactly what we're gonna do, and you're gonna learn why that works so well. And so all you're gonna do is break this up into pieces. There isn't really a right or wrong way to do it per se, but there are a few tips into what you're trying to achieve. So one of the things you probably don't wanna do is create little baseballs. And this one's not too bad, but like what we don't want to do is just make more small boulders because those don't really create the most interesting structure. So I'm trying to create, little pieces that are oblong or different, have little juts out and look, uniquely cool on their own. Because what I really want to do is take these two pieces and then glue them together so that they look like one piece. Or really you can do all kinds of different things with them. And I just want to create something totally unique using two pieces. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to chisel it up and then create different size oblong pieces. And just for reference point, this is about the size of pieces that I was using to create that little aquascape for the 18 cube. And so you can see how this would glue together to create a nice little shelf piece. And so it was a lot of these little pieces like this that I was gluing together. Now that I'm going to do something for this big 120, I'm going to probably use something closer to sizes like this. So this is going to be the goal size, but I'll probably use all kinds of different pieces. So really, you could start by just making bigger pieces and then get a feel for how much smaller they need to get, because you can just chisel off other pieces off the same piece, no problem at all. So there's a variety of different tools you could use for this. You could just use your standard hammer and like a wood chisel, but you really don't have a lot of weight behind this, and it's going to be a little harder, and you're probably going to damage this chisel pretty fast. So you could try that. That's not my preferred tools. So what I'm going to use is this big guy. I like the fact that it has the hand protector in there because I hit my hand all the time. So I'm just going to look to try to see if you can see like a natural fault line throughout the rock here. Just find one. And to me, it kind of looks like I might get one there and get kind of an oblong shape. So what I'm going to do is just put it in there, and you're going to want a big hammer. So this is a 4-pound hammer, and I really don't even really need to swing that hard just because of the weight of the hammer does a lot of the work. So I'm going to try to break this piece up into a few pieces, and let's see what I can produce. All right, so you can see I took that boulder now and I broke it down into about 5 pieces and a handful of rubble. And now instead of a round boulder, I have one kind of unique triangle-shaped piece. And then I also now have a thin kind of ledge piece that I'm for sure going to build out. And different size pieces that are going to connect together to build something unique as well. So I have what I'm looking for. So what I got to do is I'm going to start by probably busting up about 50, 60 pounds of this. It might take a little while to do that, but once you break it all up, we'll have all the pieces ready to go and we can start assembling the aquascape. All right, so after all that work, took me about a half hour or so and broke down 100 pounds of rock. So this is what about 100 pounds of rock looks like once you break it up into little bits. I'm going to give you a hot tip. You're going to find these little irregular pieces that are really small. Some of them look like this. These are the gems that you're going to want to save for later. So if you see these little pieces pop out, make sure you save them because I'm going to show you what to do with them in a little bit. But You might look at this and say there's no way that this is going to turn into anything cool because now it's just a whole bunch of rubble. And I'd say majority of the pieces ended up somewhere between here and here, but there are a few large ones that I saved that I thought were cool, but there's a lot of little pieces in here. And there's a lot of pieces that are like this. So they're no longer boulders and they're gonna come together, I guarantee it, and you're gonna see something really cool evolve. So I'm gonna move this all up the table and then I'm gonna show you the first steps of assembling all this to create our aquascape. All right, so before we get to this foundation, there's one other piece I actually wanted to share with you. So these two chisels, or this big hammer and this chisel was really what broke most of it apart. But what I did find is you can absolutely use these wood chisels. And so specifically on the rock that is the most porous, where you can see the most holes and you can see a really obvious fault line, you can definitely use these to chip off small pieces and create what you want. But I'd say that these make up about 20 or 10% of the cuts, but really these are the two main tools of this. And I don't even think you need those unless you really want to do something fine. So make sure that these are the two tools. Big 4-pound hammer, giant thing, and I will tell you that I would have hit my hand 40 times in that whole process if it wasn't for this guard, so make sure to pick that up as well. All right, so the very first step of this is pick out your foundation pieces. You only have to really pick one so far, but the foundation pieces, again, are those Marco pieces where they have machined it super duper flat. So when it's that flat, it's really stable and you can build on it so it's not gonna like rock all over the place. You know, it's really, really stable. Now, once in a while, if you get really lucky, and I found one in here, you can find one like this, which is just naturally actually really flat on the bottom. The benefit of this, if you get lucky, and I wouldn't really count on it because you really don't know what you're going to get, but in this case, is it's not as stable. You can see it rocks just a little bit, but the girth of this thing means that it's going to stay. So if you want to build something that really like sticks out a long ways and you need a lot of weight to counterbalance it, like maybe you want to pick out something like this. So I'm not really sure what we're going to use yet, but if you want, you know, you can start kind of getting an idea of how this is going to distribute in your tank. And then again, I would definitely get a couple more pieces than you think because you don't really know how it's all going to come together and you really want options. And so in this case, I might consider this lucky piece that I have here in the center. I'm going to build off of this guy right here, maybe. I'm going to look at it for just a minute. But somewhere in here, I can start to build this off, and I might not even use this thing. I might use all of this and start to build towards it and have it intersect. But you start to get an idea of how this is going to work. Start with one piece, build it out, and then take the next piece and build into it or, you know, in its own island. But make sure that you start with this foundation rock or at least something super flat. It's probably one of the most important things here because you're going to build that like almost impossible look with overhangs, and there needs to be balance and weight to it. All right, so for me, I'm just going to spread out a couple of pieces here. I didn't pick anything special. I just picked out some pieces so that I can just grab some as I go. And I'm going to start with this piece right here, foundation. And I didn't go with that gigantic piece because most of you won't have that, and I just want to work with something that most of you will have. So in this case, I did pick this one as going to be the main piece of the aquascape just because it was a little bigger and a little heavier with a little bit more weight on this side. Even though there was one in here that looked a little more interesting on the bottom, this one I think is going to help me balance the weight a little bit easier. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to use this glue here. It's just super glue, thick, extra gel, and it's just like really, really thick stuff. And then we have this Instaset, which is like acetone, and you just spray it on there and it will make it set like within seconds. So I'm going to start building up. So that's the first step, is building the structure up and getting some height out of it. And you want to be careful because I don't want to like just build it like vertical. Otherwise it's going to look like a bunch of pillars, and that's not really what we're looking for. So you just kind of want to arrange it and like look for a way that it will, you know, have an interesting structure, and you're going to want to like some kind of natural fit together so you don't see a lot of, you know, space. We're going to fill it in with that mortar, so it probably won't matter, but like a natural fit also gives it a little bit more structure, so it's just rock on rock. So I'm going to start right here with this, and you can again see the difference between just going straight up and giving it a little bit of angle. So now when I'm looking at it, I'm going to look real close and kind of see where it's touching. And the first step here for me is take this accelerator and spray it right where I think it's touching, which is right here and right there. So we're spraying this accelerator because I want it to stick to the rock like right away. So use a healthy amount. Don't be shy because it really doesn't matter. And there we go. We got a lot of glue here. And I now have my structure that's going to sit up there like this. And I can come back and put a little bit more glue in. And I missed a step here actually. I would like to have sprayed it directly onto the rock that I was gluing itself to. And I like to just take another piece of rock here and kind of smear it in because I don't want it all over my fingers as much as possible. All right, so once I think I got it, the first step I'm going to do is spray this on here again on the outside of the accelerator, and now it will start to hold. At that point, because this is the base of it, I'm definitely going to want to put a little bit more glue in there, but I'm going to wait until this dries. I'm just going to hold it here until this gets a good bond. It should probably only take 15 seconds. As you can see already, it's starting to stick. So next thing I'm going to do is actually go back and squirt some more glue in a couple of places now that I can see it's touching, and then put the accelerator on there, and I'll have my first piece of the base. This is really important. Really don't be shy with the glue because we want this thing is going to hold a ton of weight. This might actually be the only point at which the entire rest of the network is actually sitting on, so it needs to be really strong if we're going to be able to hold all that weight. All right, so I filled in glue around everywhere I can possibly put it, accelerated it, it's been about a minute, and I can now pick it up by this piece. So it holds pretty fast and pretty easy, and it isn't even anywhere near, where it's going to end cure strength. So there's two things here. So this is an important point. Why don't I use mortar here instead of the super glue and the Instaset? And if I use mortar, what happens is I'd have to put it in there, wedge it up so it doesn't fall, and then wait till tomorrow to be able to let it dry and then use the next piece. This would take me months to do. So I'm not going to do that. The goal here is to build the structure, and then I'll use a mortar later. The other question is, why don't I just use super glue? Why the mortar? And there's two reasons for that. Is this super glue I don't think is going to be strong enough long term to hold the whole thing. So we're going to use the super glue just so we can build it in a reasonable amount of time, in a matter of hours, and then come back and use a mortar to hold it all together. The mortar will also serve the purpose of hiding many of the seams. And actually right now, the glue actually hides the seam pretty well. You can see the glue if you know what you're looking for, but by the end of this, there's going to be glue all over the place. So we're going to use it for those two reasons. So I'm going to go ahead and just start building this up. I'll stop at a couple of points and explain what I'm doing, but I think we'll just kind of watch this thing evolve. All right, so already I'm at 2 pieces in, and I've developed a theme that I think is going to happen. And I think that this is going to start to go out this way as I assemble it. And so one of the choices that you have is you can reinforce it with little pieces like this one. So this connection here is going to have a lot of weight on it, just going over here. So one of the things I can do is I can glue a little piece in here. It'll be seamless. You won't even be able to see that it's here. But now it's kind of like a jack for this piece that holds up a lot of the weight. So just look for little areas that you can hide, and I'll glue this in, and it will help support all the weight. All right, I'm a couple pieces into this now, and you're going to see the tendency here is to want to create shelf after shelf after shelf as they go up. And that is absolutely an acceptable look. It's just not the look that I'm going to look for because it is not as natural as I'd like. And so You just don't see it like that. It looks kind of artificial to me. In the end, it's always going to be an artificial aquascape. But you can see, though, I'm going to say resist the temptation to just go shelf after shelf after shelf after shelf as you go for height. And hopefully I'll show you something in a second that looks a little different than that. All right, so got a little time into this, and I'm not happy with it. So I'm going to tell you a couple of reasons why I'm not happy. This is too linear. It just comes out at the exact same points, and we built the structure to hold weight straight up, which just looks too linear to me. So I'm going to break it apart, and I'm going to try to get down to about here and keep this together, and we'll see if it works. There you go. So now I'm going to take a slightly different approach, and I think I'm going to take this thing off too. Actually, I can't. Well, I'm just going to take a different direction with it or something. So that is, you're not stuck with your decisions. You can start over. They're stuck on there pretty good, but with a hammer, you can rework things. And now that I saw it, I'm just going to avoid the linear post going all the way up to the best of my ability. All right, so we've smashed it up a couple of times. Not always happy with what you produce. You just hit it with a hammer, break it apart. Sometimes you can snap it off. But it's starting to come together. So the thing I think I could say the most is the more balance you have to put into it and more impossible the whole structure looks, the better the whole thing is going to come together. So I think that this is starting to come together, and I got maybe another hour or two into finishing the pieces here, but I think that it's really stable and I can feel it doesn't want to tip over or anything. I might put a little, if I go out any farther this way, I might put a little bit more weight over here, maybe even at the base of it, just to counterbalance some of the weight. But all in all, it is starting to come together, and you can see that we're largely building a very similar structure as we did for the 18-inch cube, but for this tank. And I think that it's going to look something like this, and then we're going to start building into this one from the other side. So we'll see how it all comes together. All right, so we've had some pretty significant progress here, and the two rock structures are largely built. I'll give you just a few tips. One is I ended up using this frame a lot more than I thought I would. I thought I'd bring this frame in, because the table is almost the same size. I thought that was gonna be good enough. Just tape it off. But I ended up using this frame a lot because it gave me a dimension of how high I need to get this and how wide I could get it, where the barriers were, and like what it's gonna look like in the tank. So I use this a lot, but at this point I'm probably gonna take it off, and I'll set it aside here. Okay, so now I've got the two pieces here, and I'll give you a few tips on what happened. So one is we broke it apart like several times. Not the whole thing, but we build out a wing and then build out some other thing and just decide, that looks great until we put the other one in, and then you don't like it anymore. And in every case, I was able to break the piece off either by hand or with a hammer and just securing the rest of it. I never had a problem with the rest of it falling apart or anything. The nice thing about this superglue gel is it actually has kind of like a rubbery consistency for like the first few days. So the accelerator will hold it, but the inside's kind of like rubbery. So it gives some flex to it while it's curing. And you're actually able to chisel it like right off the surface of the rock pretty easy. So even when you redo it, you don't have like glue all over the place. So here's the thing is I don't want to break anything, so I'm going to move it a little farther apart. But we were able to create a pretty cool structure here, I think. So, again, a lot of the things that make it cool instead of stacking or try to avoid when you're stacking even is, or to give that stacked look, is creating, the impossible. So like, this whole wing here, from here all the way down to here, is only attached at this one point, and it comes all the way out. And so what you want to do is, like, it looks like it defies kind of gravity. It looks like, there's no way that thing is going to hold together. That is what you're looking for, right? And it is going to hold together for sure. But this is probably not even done yet. So what we're looking for now is to go add like some flare pieces to it. So just little bits of detail that kind of like bring it to life. And so I think you'll see them. But yeah, I mean, this is just that one base piece here. And I think you'll see how it all comes together. And so I think it was, well, like, yay. And then this one got a little bigger. So what we learned from this one is actually when you build out the bottom, the tendency is to stay really thin, and then it looks kind of twiggy by the time you're done. And so we actually started building mass into it, trying to get it to have a more natural look, and I think we achieved that with this one. And then this one we started with mass, and you can tell that that was a mentality right away because it has like a lot more mass to it. We also didn't want to recreate this exact same thing over here, so this one has your like traditional like caves and whatnot, and I think there's like 4 caves built into this thing. In this case, we used actually 3 base pieces. So here's a base piece, here's a base piece, and here's a base piece, all glued together to create the one structure. And this one's pretty heavy, but you can start to see, you know, they got these big, huge, like this whole thing is all coming out. And again, we're looking for it to look like, oh wow, that should fall apart. As much as we possibly can. And this one just has a lot of habitat for fish. So the goal here for me is to try to get these things to look like they belong together, you know, and so try to get them to cross each other a little bit and just get them to come together. So this isn't obviously done, but these are the few of the tips that we have learned so far. And now I'm going to take some pieces and I'm going to start adding them to different areas, just small pieces that give little bits of like, I guess I'd say flair or just artistic creation to, you know, other pieces of it and really bring it to life. So that's the next step. Okay, so one of the things you need to think about here is when you're creating these impossible overhangs is that eventually there's too much weight on the joint for super glue to be a realistic bond, at least in the short term, even with the accelerator. So you gotta think about how you're going to support it. And so in this case, I'm gonna put this little piece in here, and this little triangle here will help support the weight. I don't wanna put more glue on the edges because it's just the bond of the glue is the only thing supporting it. So if I can put in actual structure that helps support it with the support of the glue as well, I'll be able to hold the structure up better. Once I get all of the structure done, the mortar is what's really going to provide all of the structural support. But for right now, I want to get this piece in here to help make sure that all of this doesn't fall down. All right, so this is probably the best tip of the entire day. If you want to build out like shelves that we've created here, the tendency is to hope that you've created a shelf piece by cracking the rock in half. But they always end up kind of thick and they just don't seem to work out the way that you'd like. They're also really heavy. So despite what you might think, it isn't trying to find one of these pieces. It's actually trying to find multiples of little pieces that you can glue together to create that shelf. That's what this is here. That's what this is here. That's actually what most of the shelves you're seeing here. So I'm not going to be able to do this probably on camera, but in this case, I'm going to use these 3 pieces together that create a shelf. So I'm going to glue it, and once you mortar it together, you'll really never know that it wasn't one piece. But what I get then is 3 different pieces, and I can actually get it to wrap around, the structure in a way that like you would never be able to do, like find a miracle piece that wraps around the structure perfectly. And now I can create a shelf look that will end up looking like a shelf that goes all around it. I can actually create irregular shelves now too, where not only is it going up, but it's also going down, which looks a lot more natural and adds like a different layer to it. So one of the things that I've definitely seen here that makes it look the best is when you don't build totally flat surfaces and it's irregular, it's going up, it's going down, it's going in different directions. So that's probably one of the best tips of the whole thing here, is when you're trying to build it out, consider what a bunch of little small pieces look like together. Just start assembling them right around in your hands and eventually it'll come together. All right, so we just finished up gluing this whole thing together with the super glue and the accelerator. And I got to tell you, if super easy and quick is the thing you're looking for, and this is your first rodeo, and you just want to set up your tank super fast, probably isn't it. However, if you really like part of the hobby is to create something artistic that you're going to enjoy for many years, you're going to take a lot of pride in what you've produced, this is definitely the project, and it isn't that hard. And so sadly, in this kind of light, you can't really see the 3D depth of this thing, but like, you know, how far all of this like comes before through how many networks of holes and everything there are going through all of this. I mean, on camera it kind of looks like this thing is one piece, but this is actually two pieces that are interwound together. So you're going to be able to see that in some other shots as we assemble it together. We're going to get a little bit of different lighting. I can no longer, you know, just swivel it around so you can see all the holes because they probably hit each other at this point and break apart. But I got a few tips for you. First is however much Instaset that you order, double it. I think we went through maybe like 8 little bottles of this because we did take it apart a few times, like different areas of it when we didn't like it, put it back together. But you spray a lot of this to get it to hold. I mean, this whole thing is attached right here and it goes all the way up here. You know, all of this whole thing is attached just right here at the bottom. So you're using a lot of glue and you're using a lot of Instaset. The glue, I think we only used like 2 bottles of this, and I didn't go through all the way through the second one. So something like this, 120 gallons, you probably would only go through 2, but like a lot of this stuff, 6, 7, 8 bottles of it. Just really, the biggest tip here is make sure in every case, spray the rock first and then put the glue on because it will instantly adhere to the rock. If you put the glue on first, really you're only going to spray the outside and then just only the outside is actually holding it together. Really it's super important to spray it on the rock first, then the glue. So the next step here is actually to build the structure so it holds. So this is obviously holding together pretty well and I could probably move it around quite a bit, but if these two pieces weren't going to touch each other. However, it's probably not going to hold forever. I don't know. I just don't trust it. So what I'm going to do is then come back and use the mortar. So the mortar is going to serve a couple of different purposes. A, it's going to secure all of the different joints. And right now it looks pretty good. This is going to uglify it. This is going to make it look terrible because there's going to be cement all over it. We'll fix that in the next step. But we're going to put glue, or this mortar, which is like a cement. And again, this mortar here isn't just like some cement you pick up at Home Depot. It's a marine grade mortar. It cures underwater. Cement takes like a month or so to cure, so you do want something that cures underwater. It also has a polymer in it, which will give it just a little bit of flex so it doesn't just like crumble if it gets too much weight on it or whatnot. So I don't know. I think it's worth it to get the right tool for the right job here. And I don't know. This is what I would use anyway. So in this case, you're going to mix it up. I'll show you in just a second how to mix it up. But we're going to go around to basically all of the joints and I'm going to plug it in and it's going to provide structure, even these little joints, you know, the little flares and everything. I'm going to put it in there because I want the thing to hold together the whole time. And if I put a little frag up here, I don't want it to fall off at any point in time, especially if I'm like, you know, trying to, you know, frag it at some point, you know, it's produced a big colony. And so we'll go through the whole thing, hide all the joints, and that's going to give us another opportunity actually to put some in and like smooth out the areas in between the rocks so it actually looks like one aquascape. It'll look terrible again because it'll be filled with cement, but we'll make it look nice, especially after it grows coralline algae. But even without that, we'll use a sand and some other glue to make it look nice. But we're going to put that in there. It'll make it look nice and it'll be secure. All right, so we're getting ready to do the mortar here. There's a couple of different things I got. I got some mortar from the eMarco. I got their little water and polymer bag. They give you a little like mixing tool. I need a spray bottle for water, and there's some sand over there. Also, you'll notice that we, built out a little cardboard box around the table, but you could just use your own, any kind of cardboard box or anything. And this is going to hold all the sand in. So one of the things is you're going to use the sand to try to cover up the cement. And it's really easy to pour it on the top, but like when I get in here, really what I'm going to do is just kind of like throw it in there. So it's a little harder to get in, on your hands into certain places. So what I like to do is just let it fall to the ground and put it in and just throw it back up. And it's just really a lot easier with this box. And then the box obviously holds in the mess. So all you really need to do is mix a little bit of this cement up. So you don't really need a whole lot, because I wouldn't mix up a lot because it lasts for about 20 minutes. And there's different consistencies that you can mix it to, but but you're going to use this. And they say, you know, they give you this, and then you add about 12 ounces of water to it, and this will be your polymer mix. Again, this polymer will help the cement have just like a little bit of flex to it so it doesn't crumble if it were ever to get a little bit. You don't really need very much of this. And so you're going to mix it all up. And the goal here is, like, I think, to make it kind of like a thick peanut butter. So here's the thing, is the wetter it is, the more it will stick to the rock, and probably the better the joint you're going to get if you're like a little bit thinner peanut butter. However, if it's really thick, you can create kind of like a putty that's really easy to push into joints. That putty tends to not stick as well to the different joints here. But you can see already what I've created is this is kind of like a wet putty. And I think you want to make it a little thicker than this for the best results. But there's some areas where you just want to be able to push it in. And so one of the things that you can do here is use this spray bottle. And you're going to want to use this on every single joint. And basically what this is going to do is get it wet, so when it pushes in, it starts to adhere to the surface much better. The cement will like get into the pore structure. So say I wanted to do right here, I'm just going to spray this, get it nice and wet, and then I'm going to use the putty here, and I'll apply it into the joint, and then we'll let it rest for about 24 hours. Again, this is going to have probably the full strength after like a month, but in 24 hours, you're going to have most of the strength. What I wouldn't do is come back and look at it and give it a little jostle in 2 hours, because you're actually going to break the bond permanently, and there'll be no going back. You have to get it all out and start over again. So whatever you do, when you put it in, make sure to wait 24 hours. And again, I only made a little bit here because I want to go in and be able to do little bits and take my time. And this thing is going to last maybe 20 minutes, but I've seen sometimes only as little as 10 minutes. The wetter it is, the longer it seems to last. I wouldn't re-wet it. I don't know if that works or not. I just start over, and that's why I got all these little bowls here. And really, there's areas where I want it wet and where I don't want it wet, and have it thicker. So it's helpful to mix it up every single time you need to use it. All right, so this whole piece right here obviously is just hanging out to the side. I'm just going to start, you can really start anywhere you want, but I want to make sure that like pieces like this don't fall off. I'm actually going to try to get every last little overhang really everywhere, but obviously this is the parts where you're going to really want to get it in there and create a structure. So first thing I'll do is spray it. I want to get it wet again. In this case, you can see it's a little thicker that I got, but it's going to allow me, that thickness is going to allow me to get it in there. And when you're thinking about it, doing it, what you really want to do is make sure that it has like a ledge to it a little bit, so that it will support the weight. And this is like the reason why I don't like making it so thin, is because the stuff falls off. If it was really, really thin, it'd be hard to get it into the areas where I need it the most. So there's probably a tool out there that you could kind of paste it in there a little bit better with. And I'm not really going to worry a whole lot about like the fact that it looks kind of smooth and man-made, because there's tricks to fix that later on. I really want to like fix the joints. I want to make sure that the joints here are fully filled in, and that it's going to support the weight when I need it to. But I mean, you can kind of make it irregular if you want. All right, so now that I got this in here, I think maybe I might go around the edge here. So I'm going to come around front a little bit as well. Really just push it in there, because you want it to adhere to the cement. And this rock kind of has like a powdery surface, so it kind of tends to dry out and not want to adhere. But just work it in there, get it into the holes. Even if it doesn't stick to the exact surface, if it fills in all of those little holes on it, then you'll be able to keep it together. All right, so now that's what that looks like. You can see that it's kind of ugly. It's gray. We have a couple of different options to it. So the first option I'll show you is actually just throwing sand at it. So like I said, it's kind of actually hard to get sand in here sometimes, so you know, we'll just do the best that we can. But the wetter it is, the more the sand's going to want to stick to it. And I'm going to tell you right now, my experience is that like it needs to be pretty wet for the sand to stick to it. However, the wetter you make it, the more it wants to deteriorate and have, you know, gray just cover all the rocks. So there's a different way that I'll show you in a minute to fix this up. So you want to watch this whole video before you go do this. But I'm going to try it right here. And so there's another way I'm going to show you in just a second. There's actually 3 ways to make this look nicer. All right. So now I'm just going to take all this sand and push it in. You can see, like, I'm not, if I didn't have this box here, by the time I was done with this, it would just be sand everywhere. But yeah, just push it right in. Now my hope here is that the sand is actually just going to stick to this surface, and it probably will to some degree, but it's not going to like be coated in sand probably. We're going to explore a couple different ways here though. I'll say that this Marco sand actually is kind of moist in the bag, so it kind of sticks to stuff as it is. It has a, like, it will hold like this. When you, if it was just dry, it would all just fall away. So the fact that it's kind of moist allows it to stick like this. So we'll see how that one turns out. My suggestion is tomorrow when we pull this off, it's still going to be kind of gray, but I'm actually going to do one right next to it so you can see the difference between like when it's just straight up cement, when it is covered in sand, and then the third method I'll show you in just a second. Okay, another thing you really want to think about when you're doing this is that a lot of the pieces are actually glued together, meaning they're kind of adhered like this and they're pulling apart from each other, but you know, the glue is holding it together. But there might be a gap in between. And so what you really want to do is put the cement down in the gap so they're resting. So like right here, this piece here is attached to this piece and the glue is kind of holding it together, so the cement will kind of bond. But if I can fill in the gap here, then the whole weight rests on like a lever and it makes it a lot more secure. So make sure to think about that. And so I'm just going to spray it up in here. I'm trying to not put it in places that you're going to see it as much as possible, but obviously that's not possible. So right here, now I've filled in this space in between the rock. And it will help support all of the weight. It's a really, really important step. All right, so I got 3 joints here. One we've hidden underneath the sand here. It'll fall away tomorrow. I think we'll have a light sprinkling of sand in it. I did another one right here, goes all the way around, and I didn't bother to put any sand on it. And then I have one right here, and I'm going to do another technique here. And what we're going to do is we're going to come back tomorrow, and I'll be able to show you what all 3 end up looking like when you're done. There is a third step using the super glue and the sand, so don't worry about it. Any 3 of these ways will work, but I just want to give you a different idea about the amount of effort you're going to put into it. So down here is the cement, and it goes all the way around. So on the back side, it's gray, and we can fix that if we want to, but you don't necessarily have to, because the only angle that I can actually see the gray from is back here, and if this thing's up against the wall, then who cares, I guess, you know. However, this is definitely visible. So one of the things you could do is put a really light coating of pretty thin cement. So this is really thin, and what this will do is allow you to really stick the sand to it. So we're going to see how that works, and we'll just kind of paint it on because it's super thin. All right, so you can see it's on there now, and we'll come back tomorrow, but now I'm going to get it a little bit better, I think. And I think you're just going to have to use like toothpicks or something, because obviously this paintbrush is going to be done in just a minute. But now I'm going to put the sand on it. And that wetter cement is almost certainly going to hold on to it a lot better. But I guess we're going to see. All right, so I came back in the morning here, and there's 3 different joints. There's the cement here, here, and here. And there was a different result between the 3 different approaches that I think I'd like to share, because it might change the way that I do this going forward. The first is here, I just pushed it in. This is like the peanut butter thick or extra thick peanut butter. Like, I just pushed it in. And it works just fine, and it's going to hold it all together, you know, really created a really solid joint already. But the one thing you'll notice is that it's pretty smooth, and you know, it has that kind of arc from your fingers that you pushed it in. The way I'm going to correct that later is to take the super glue, like the really thin, like watery type super glue, and get it on there, and I'll put sand on it, and then you can actually sprinkle little mounds on it and kind of create a regular surface, and then wick the super glue in, and then it creates, you know, that regular surface. But that's a little bit of work to do, so especially when you got so many joints to do, but that's how you're going to do it, and it's going to cover it up with sand. You won't be able to see it. Obviously, you could just like wait for coralline algae to cover it, and then you'd never see the difference. So if you got patience, you can actually just look at all the cement joints for the next 6 months or so and not worry about it. However, here, what we did was spray it down with water and then push the sand into it. And I'm using a really fine sand, and I'm gonna tell you, this fine sand actually matches the color of this perfectly. That's why I'm using the Marco Bahamas sand, is it matches the color perfectly when you're done. However, the fine sand seems to not really stick to the cement really well. So if you're just going to use this stage, I think I'd use something a little coarser because it pushes in and sticks better. So maybe somewhere in between like the special grade and the crushed coral, like somewhere in there, but the larger grains I think are going to stick into it better. This powdery stuff seems to like just dry it out and not really stick to it very well. So I don't know if I would use this if you're going to use this method right here as your primary way to cover it up, because you could do this in one coat, I think. And so that leads to right here. All right, so in this case, after we created that peanut butter thick cement to provide the structural support, we created that really thin mortar, which is maybe like honey or even a little bit less than that, and just kind of brushed it on. It was still smooth when we did it, but then when I pushed the sand into it, it created this like irregular surface. So in this case, if this was all white, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between this rock, the mortar, and the rock next to it, which is the ideal look. It didn't hold the sand, again, because I think that this sand here is maybe a little too dusty, and it just kind of dries it out immediately and doesn't stick. But what it did do here is create that super cool, like regular surface that bridges the gap almost uniformly. This is what I call ideal. So if you're willing to put the time in, I think this is the best option. And so what I think I'm gonna actually do is do that method on this whole thing. I'm gonna go through and actually just do this method right here, which is just push it in everywhere. And then I'm gonna come back and put that really thin coat right on top of it, of that like more honey or even lighter or thinner type of cement, and I don't actually have to get it all around. I only have to put it in the areas where you can actually see it, because that's the areas that matter. And I'll push that sand in and create that irregular surface. So it'll get a little dusty and sand, but I'm gonna come back and just cover it up with the other sand and thin super glue. But that's what I learned out of this whole thing. There's 3 different ways to do it. If you got time, it doesn't matter which one you do, but there are benefits to different approaches. All right, so we finished mortaring here, and I do have some tips to share about the experience of doing it. And now that you have this like 2-tone color where it's not all just one rock color, you can actually start to see the depth actually and where the different pieces are actually going. There are a couple of things here that I think that you'll note. One is this side seems to have a little bit more mortar in it than this side, and there's 2 reasons for that, and that's part of the experience that I'll share with you. So we started on this one, and I didn't have gloves on when I did it. And this is my experience with that, is with your fingers you get a little bit more agile application, but it sticks to your fingers, which means if you're doing it pretty wet, it is really, really hard to apply. So I was using a little bit drier, and I was a little bit more careful about where I put it. And somewhere about 2/3 through this, I started using gloves, and I found that you should absolutely wear gloves. And this is the reason, is that you can apply it much wetter. So like a creamier peanut butter, and the wetter is going to stick to the rock better and it just adhere better. It's easier, a little easier to work with if you're wearing gloves. So if you're wearing gloves, you can push it up in there. And I'll also say one of these things, these are little coffee stir sticks we have around the office. These were like super integral to being able to push, you know, into the crevices that were hard to reach. So, you know, these are probably a couple bucks for a box of them. Definitely get something like this. Not like a tongue depressor, like something really thin like a stir stick was what I used, and I felt like it worked really well. So the second piece of this is we used a lot more over here because this is actually over here a lot of bigger pieces. And this one over here is a lot of smaller pieces glued together to form a bigger piece. So like this big huge jut out here that traveled all the way and then turns and then starts to go down again, like that isn't a normal piece. You can't like chisel that out. So we had to create it out of pieces, and it looks like it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, like quite a few. There's probably 15 pieces in there that are all together, and so that's why there's so many seams in it. And you can probably start to see how many pieces this is just by looking around and seeing how much mortar there is. You couldn't see with the super glue, but now you can see it. I also used a lot of it to fill in the areas where it looked like it was 2 pieces and now it looks like 1. And granted, it's gray at the moment, but you will be able to smooth it out and make it look like 1 rock. Now we're going to color it in the next step with the sand. But I think we're all done here, and the mortar turned out good. So a thinner, creamy, like peanut butter actually seemed to work the best for me. Using gloves, definitely use the gloves. Before we move on actually from the mortar, I got one other tip, because you're probably wondering how much you use. And when I was mixing this stuff up with the powder and the water and everything, it was gas, add some more powder, add some more liquid, go back and forth, and it was just like, it took a lot of time, extra time trying to guess each time. Dave is smarter than me, so he used a measuring cup, and so it's super important that you level it because just a tiny bit of this changes the consistency quite a bit. So what we found, and then this changes based on your humidity and all kinds of other things, but so figure it out and then just replicate it, is 1/3 cup of this mortar to 18 milliliters or 16 to 18 milliliters of the fluid, created about the consistency that we were looking for. So, you know, use that ratio, but find a ratio for you that will work, because if you can just squirt it in there, mix it up, it like speeds it up by triple speed. And also, this was about the right amount. So if you have a friend, actually, it worked out really well, is he would mix one up, I'd start using it, he'd immediately start mixing the next one up, and by the time it was mixed, I was kind of done with the next one. And so it really sped up the whole process. So if you're doing this with a friend, have somebody mix it, maybe trade off. But yeah, 1/3 cup of the mortar mix to 18 milliliters of the solution. All right, so now it's time to actually make this look pretty. And so you could just throw it in the tank right now, in a matter of 6 months or so, the whole thing would be purple and you wouldn't see any of the cement anyways. But I really want this to look nice the moment I put it in the tank, because I put a lot of time and heart and soul into this thing. So the moment I put it in the tank, I want to be proud of it and make it look nice, not wait 6 months and hope it looks nice later. And over time, these smooth areas that don't really match the rough area next to it from the mortar will also get kind of lumpy, because the coralline algae grows over itself and creates layers, and it will create a natural surface over time. It'll also get covered up largely with coral and stuff. So you could stop now, but you put all this time and effort into it, so let's at least talk about how that you could make it look nice day one. And so we're going to make all of this gray mortar turn into the rock color, and we're going to do that using the Marco sand. And so the Marco sand is moist, it's a little yellower, but white, or when it's dry, it's the exact same color as a rock, and that's why we're going to use that. I'm sure you can use other sands if you want, but if you have a choice and you're buying it for this purpose, I would buy that one. All right. It's really fine also, so you won't see like big chunks of sand sticking out every single place in the tank. So we're gonna make this look, put a little extra time into it. All right, so the other thing that we're gonna do is take these flat surfaces and create a irregular surface, so you can't really see that this is glue. So this area right here looks identical to the area that it's next to, and there's two ways to do that, and I'll show you both of them in just a minute. But the first way is we're going to mix up some of the mortar again, but this time we're going to mix it up really thin, like somewhere between like malted milk and like honey. And we're just going to kind of smear it on as a skim coat over, probably go a little bit over onto the rock, and then we're going to push the sand into it. And when we do that, not only will some of the sand stick to it, and you saw it earlier in the video here, but like it will create an irregular surface from that process of pushing it in. And so hopefully we won't be able to see like texture-wise where any of it is. And then after that, if we see any areas that didn't turn out the way we wanted, it's actually as simple as taking some of the sand, sprinkling it on top. It creates a regular surface, and then we wick the liquid super glue into it, and it just creates that surface, and it's done. Like, you won't be able to see the difference between this and this at all. And that would be the actually last step too, is we're gonna take this liquid super glue, and we're just gonna put a thin coat on every surface, and then sprinkle the super glue on top of it, and it will magically turn it into the white color of the rock, hiding all of the mortar. So we're gonna do a few of those steps now, and you're gonna see this transform into its final stages. All right, so we finished adding the sand and the cement, and if you look closely, you can obviously see, you know, where the joints are. But the skim coat worked perfect. So when we put that skim coat of the mortar on that was really thin, and then added on the sand and pushed it in, it created that irregular surface on all of the cement, so it no longer looks smooth anywhere. And you can obviously see where the joints are, but they blend in really well, and once they're covered in coralline algae, like, this is going to look like one solid uniform structure. And the super bright gray from the cement is now dulled out with the layers of glue and the super watery super glue and the sand. And I'll give you a couple of tips, especially on the vertical surfaces where it's kind of hard to get to the glue on. You know, kind of dribble it on, get it coated, throw the sand at it, and get it packed on there. It'll have like a dusty layer on it. Immediately go over it again and throw another layer on, and that's how you'll kind of build up some of that powdery sand. Now, I will say this. If you're willing to see the sand grains, that if you use like something like special grade, which has larger chunks on it, you can actually probably get this done in 1 or 2 coats of super glue and then throwing the sand on. But you will definitely see all of the different joints where that sand is. Over time, you probably won't, but right away. So if you're willing to do 3 or 4 coats with the glue and the more powdery, like oolite type sand, you're going to be able to get a more uniform look to the whole thing. Just takes a little bit more. I probably spent about $60 in glue from Home Depot. We are going to find a thin BRS glue that we'll be able to offer in big chunks, so you'll be able to do that at home for a little cheaper than I did it. But this is the finished product. If you hold on for just a second, we'll take some shots of it in 3D, because right now when one piece of rock is sitting in front of the other, it just looks like one. But if we start spinning the camera around and seeing all the different shadows, all that's coming up in just like probably a minute, you'll be able to see how this really came together in a more 3D environment. But overall, this is the type of project that, you know, I don't think most people would do this on their first reef. They would probably just stack some rocks up and hope for the best, because you're in a time crunch. You like to get it going fast. But if you've been doing the reefing for a while, this is actually a type of project where you can do different steps of it on the weekend. Probably takes a few different weeks to do it. A lot of people asked how much rock we ended up using, by the way. This is a 120-gallon aquascape, and we ended up using about 150 pounds, but we only used 75 pounds of that because you need the right pieces to get it done. We also bought 4 large and 4 small of the bases, and we probably used half of those, but having the right ones allowed us to do what we want. So you definitely want to get more than you actually need, because it's an artistic structure that you're trying to create something very unique instead of, you know, just trying to stack what you have and make it work. All right, I said this earlier in this project, but I'll say it again. This is an evolution of my own hobby for me, and I probably will never like just stack rock and hope for the best again. now that I know that I can actually create something that's unique to my own artistic desires, I will absolutely do that from here on out. It does take some time. It's probably, if this is your first rodeo, you probably wouldn't do something like this because it would probably take you 3-ish weekends. You know, 1 weekend to build the structure, 1 weekend to mortar it, and then 1 weekend to do some final touches on it. But this is a hobby. And what is a hobby without stuff to do and perfect and make it better and better every single time that you do it? So this fits right inside that for me. And you know, with an effort like this, I feel like ownership of the tank and like something I just never had from building any other aquascape I've ever done. So hopefully you guys like this, and I don't know, we'll leave you with some shots of how to do this, but I think this is one of the coolest projects that I've ever done this hobby, and it was really fun to share with you guys.